So today I'm going to be walking through how I made this fully reversible top with multi-waist straps, which is my Ella pattern, and then these super wide trousers, which is my Elmer pattern. Both of them are available on my Etsy, which I've linked below. I've tried to make sure everything's as beginner friendly as possible, and I think that's everything, so let's get on with the video. So for this project, you will need some 4-way stretch fabric. This is 95% cotton, 5% elastane. I'm going to be using 2 colours because the top is reversible, so this is going to be the other side of the top. You could also definitely make the trousers in a woven non-stretch fabric. You would just need to add some kind of fastening to the top, like a button or a zip. You will need some fabric scissors or something to cut out your pattern pieces. Something to draw out your pattern pieces. I'm using fabric pens, some pins, some flat braided elastic. This is 5 to 6 millimeters wide. I'm going to use this for the top. And then for the trousers, I'm going to be using a flat braided elastic that is about 1 inch wide. And one last thing that I forgot, I am going to be using some interfacing for my hems as well. So I'm going to start by making my top. So I'm going to lay the multicolored fabric out flat with the right side facing up, and then lay this cream fabric on top of it with the right sides facing together. So I've just finished laying my fabric out. I cut a smaller piece of this multicolored one because it is huge, and then I've just laid them out with right sides facing together and smoothed out all the creases. So for the top, I've got 2 pattern pieces. I've got the first pattern piece, which is the general top piece, and then the second pattern piece, which is the strap. So for the top, I'm going to draw this out twice onto my fabric, which will give you 4 pieces in total because they will be pinned together. And then for the strap, I'm going to draw 4 of these onto my fabric. So in total, we're going to draw 2 of the top pieces and 4 of the strap pieces, which with the 2 layers of fabric will give us 4 of the top piece and 8 of the straps. So I'm just going to go and draw all of those in. So I've just finished drawing my pieces onto my fabric, and something I forgot to mention, there are a few marks on the pattern that you want to pay attention to. So for the strap, there is a center mark, and for that you want to just draw a mark just on one end of the strap. So you've got the center mark on both ends, but I've just drawn a mark just at the bottom of those straps. And then for the top, you have a mark that shows where the straps are going to attach. So I've just drawn those marks in there as well. So the mark that you've drawn onto the bottom of the straps will be attaching to this mark on the straps here. So once you have drawn all of your pieces out, I'm just going to take some pins and pin within the lines that I have drawn. This is just going to make it easier to cut 2 nearly identical pieces from both layers of fabric, and it is also going to help when we start to put everything together. It's going to be easier to already have everything pinned in place. So I'm going to repeat that for each of my pieces, just putting the pins inside the lines, and then I'm going to cut them out and I'll show you once I have done that. So these are all my pieces cut out. I've got my 2 top pieces with the 2 layers of fabric, and then the 4 straps with, again, the 2 layers of fabric. So I'm going to start by working on my straps. So I'll just keep one of them and put everything else to one side. So for the straps, I'm going to keep the 2 layers pinned together, and I'm just going to follow around the edges, but leaving open the edge where I have left the center mark. So I've got my center mark here. I'm just going to go down this side, across the end here, and then down this side, and just leave this open. I'm going to do that on my overlocker. You can also use a zigzag stitch. So I've just sewn around these edges, and I'm going to turn this piece to the right side out. So now your strap will look something like this, and this is completely optional, but I would really recommend it. I am going to add a top stitch to both sides. So I'm literally just going to sew straight down these 2 edges with a zigzag stitch. This will just help it to lie a little bit flatter and to take out some of the bulk of it. So once you have added a top stitch, it will look like this. So I literally just followed down the edge on each side. So I'll go and do that with that one, and then you want to repeat that for all 4 of your straps. So the first thing I'm going to do is to sew along this bottom edge with my overlocker. Again, you can use a zigzag stitch. And then on top of the seam that I will have sewn here, I'm going to lay some flat braided elastic along that seam and sew it straight on top. This is just going to help it stay where you want it to on your waist. So I'm going to go and do that. So I've just finished sewing along this bottom edge. So now I'm going to add my elastic. I'm just going to take the end of my elastic and lay that straight on top of the seam, and then place that underneath my foot. It doesn't matter which side you sew the elastic to. I'm just going to sew it to the cream side, because whichever side you sew it to has slightly more of a chance to peek through to the other side. So I think the cream is the better of the two fabrics to kind of peek through. So I'm just going to use this finger to guide the elastic along that seam that I've already sewn. And then just trim that off at the end and sew it the rest of the way. So that's how that should look. So now that I have sewn this bottom edge, I can add my straps. I'm just going to remove these pins for now. So I'm just going to find the mark that I've got on the top and match it up to the mark on the strap, making sure you've got the right fabrics facing each other. So I've got cream facing cream here. I'll match up those marks, and I'm just for now going to pin this just through the front layer of the top, and then just kind of fold that strap out of the way. And then now I'm going to pin the rest of this top edge in place on this side. So just pin in at this outer corner, and then I'm going to put a pin around the center as well. And now that we've got this roughly lined up, I can take this pin out just the front layer and put it in through the back. You can just do that in the first place. I just find it's a lot easier to line things up the way that I've just done it. So I'm just going to repeat for the other strap, and then I'll be back. So now that I've got my straps pinned in place, I'm going to essentially repeat the same thing as I did on the bottom seam. So I'm going to sew straight across this top edge, making sure that you get your straps in the stitch. And also making sure that your straps are facing down rather than at an angle. So I'm just going to sew straight across there. You want to get both layers of the top and also the straps in that. And then on top of that, I'm going to go straight over with some elastic again. So it's going to be exactly the same as this. You're just going to have a couple of straps to go over the top as well. So I've just finished sewing across this top edge and adding the elastic, and then I've gone in and repeated the exact same steps for my remaining pieces. So I'm just going to turn this one to the right side out, and then I'm going to place this one inside the one that's inside out. So you want to make sure you've got the right fabric facing each other. So I've got cream facing up here and cream facing up here. Just going to kind of fold these straps down on themselves, and then I'm going to place this inside here, just straight across to the other side. So now again, I'm just going to tuck these straps in here. If you want to make that a little bit easier, you can kind of pin them out the way. So now I'm going to line up this edge for both pieces and pin down that side. So you should be pinning through 4 layers of fabric here. Just make sure you're not going through any of your straps, because we don't want to sew them into the side seams. And then repeating that for the other side, again, just tuck in all of those straps out of the way. Just lining that up and pinning in place. So now I'm just going to sew down these two sides to create my side seams. Just make sure, like I said, that the straps stay out of the way of your seams. Again, if you wanted to pin them to keep them out of the way, you can. So I'm just going to sew down both of these sides with my overlocker. So now that I've sewn down my side seams, I need to turn this to the right side out. Now that is essentially no good seam to unpick to turn it to the right side out, because here you've got 4 layers, so you don't really want to undo there, and then the top and bottom you've got elastic, so it's a little bit tricky. But for that reason, I'm just going to pick an area that you're going to see the least. So I'm going to pick around this armpit area. I'm just going to pick a small hole. It really doesn't need to be very big because it's quite a small top, and then we're going to use that to pull the top through to the right hand side. You will have an area of elastic that's just kind of floating and not attached to anything, but it won't make any difference to how the top fits. So I've just got my hole unpicked here. It's only tiny, so I hope this will actually be big enough to turn it to the right side out, because you want to make sure you're not stretching it too much. In fact, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. It's a little bit better. I'm just going to slowly push that through to the right side. So your top is very nearly finished now. I just need to close up this hole. So I'm going to use a ladder stitch by hand. Like I said, you will have some elastic that's just kind of floating around, but it won't really make a huge amount of difference. So I'm just going to close up that hole. So for my ladder stitch, I've just got the seam here, and you can just kind of fold it in on itself, which should be quite easy because that was folded in on itself when we first sewed it. And then at the top of that fold, I'm just going to go in for 1 stitch on one side, and then over to the other side for another stitch, and then just keep doing that back and forth for the length of your hole. So just one side and then back over to the other side. Just zoom in a little bit more so you can see a little bit better. So the top of the fold on this side, and then back over to the other side. And just keep doing that until you've done the length of the hole, and then I'm going to come back on myself, so I've got a double layer of stitches, and tie it off at this end. So now that I've closed up this hole, the top is done, and I can move on to the trousers. One last thing that you might want to do is to add a top stitch around the top and around the bottom. It will just kind of help it lie a little bit more flat, but I think I'm just going to leave it as is because it will sit fine when it's on the body. So now I'm going to move on to making my trousers. So I'm going to lay the rest of the fabric out. So I've just finished laying out my fabric. So I've laid it out in 2 layers just to make it a little bit easier to cut the trouser pieces because they're quite large. So you'll have 3 pattern pieces for this one. You'll have pattern piece 3, which is a waistband, which you want to cut on a fold. So it's going to be double the length of this one. You've got pattern piece 2, which is your pocket. So for this one, you want to cut 2 in this orientation and then flip it and cut 2 in this orientation. And then you also have the trousers piece, which is almost impossible to get in frame. This one, you also want to cut 4 of these out. And again, you want to cut 2 in this orientation with this dip facing right, and then flip it and cut another 2 with this dip facing in the other direction. And then you will see at the very top here, you have a mark which is going to tell you where your pockets are going to go. So you just want to leave a mark in that when you draw them out. So I'm just going to draw all these out and get them all cut out because it's quite difficult to see right now. And then I will lay them all out in a way that you can see a little bit better. So now that I've got everything cut out, this is the waistband, which I cut on the fold here. So then you can open that out for the full piece. And then I have my 4 pocket pieces cut out. As you can see, I've got 2 in one orientation and 2 in the other. So these 2 have got the straight edge facing left, and these 2 have got the straight edge facing right. And then I've also got 4 of my trousers pieces cut out as well. Like I said, these have got 2 in one orientation, so with this edge facing right, and then 2 in the opposite orientation with this edge facing left. So I'm going to start with these pieces. I'm going to take 2 of these, put 2 to the other side. So I'm just going to take 2 of my pieces and lay them with the right sides facing together, just like this. And then I'm just going to pin around this edge here, which is kind of like the crotch area. So I've just pinned down this edge here, and now I'm going to go in and sew this with my overlocker. Just this section here. Obviously you can use a zigzag stitch as well. So I've just sewn down this edge, and now I can fold the trousers out. Now I'm going to add the pockets. So I'm going to find the mark that I left from the guide on the pattern, and then just taking one of my pocket pieces, I'm going to lay this right sides together, and I'm going to line up the top edge of the pocket to that mark that I've left, and then this straight edge of the pocket is going to line up to the straight edge of the trousers. I'm going to pin that in place. So I'm going to repeat that for the other side. So now I'm just going to go in and sew these pockets in place just down this edge at the side. I'm going to use my overlocker. You can use a zigzag stitch. And then I'm going to repeat all of this for my remaining pieces of my trousers. The only piece that I'm going to leave out is the waistband. So I've just sewn my pockets in place. I'm going to fold them out. And then I'm going to take my piece that I have made that is exactly the same as this and lay that right on top of this with right sides facing together. And I'll lay that on top of there. Just start to match up the corresponding edges. So now I'm going to start to pin this together so that we have the full trousers piece. So I'm going to pin across at the top of this pocket and around the edge of the pocket, down the side of the trousers, so right down here, and then also up and round the crotch. Now it's very difficult for me to show here, so I'm going to pin it in place and then sew it with my overlocker. Again, you can use zigzag stitch, and then I'm going to show you with it all laid out on the floor so I can show you exactly where I've sewn. So I've just finished sewing these 2 pieces together, and I've sewn up this side, around this pocket, and then just at this top bit here just above the pocket. I've done that on both sides, and then I have also done this central bit as well. So I've sewn right around here and right up here, and then the same on the other side. Hopefully that makes a bit more sense than what you could see on the table. So now I'm going to move on to making the waistband. So now moving on to my waistband, I'm going to take this piece and fold it right sides facing together and just pin down this edge. I'm going to go in and sew down this edge with my overlocker. You can use a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to go and sew that, and then at the same time I'm going to take my piece of waistband elastic, which I have cut to size. There is a table on the instructions that will tell you what size you need for this. And I'm going to sew down this edge as well. So sewing down this end here and this end of the fabric. So now that I've sewn both of those edges in place, I'm just going to take this piece and fold it in half again, but in the other direction, so that you have your waistband like this. And then I'm going to place this piece of elastic inside here, which is easier said than done. So then now I've put the elastic in there, so it should go all the way around. I'm now going to pin this end together, so we're kind of concealing that elastic in there. I'm going to sew around this bottom edge. I'm going to start by pinning it in place. So I've just finished pinning around that edge. So you should have your waistband fabric folded in half with the elastic inside. So I'm just going to follow around this edge with my overlocker. Again, you can use a zigzag stitch, but this is the raw edge rather than the folded edge. So I'm just going to follow that round. So this is how that looks once I have sewn it in place. The only other thing you might want to do before you sew this seam is to sew the side seam of your elastic to the side seam of your fabric waistband, just to make sure that they kind of stay in the same place and that your elastic doesn't move, like the side seam doesn't move to the center, because it would look a bit weird. But I find that it tends to stay on its own. So it's up to you if you want to do that or not, and you can also quite easily move it inside the waistband. So that is up to you. So now I'm going to attach this to the trousers. So I've got my trousers here and I've turned them to the right side out, and then I've just got the top of the trousers here with my pockets tucked in. So I'm going to take this waistband and, finding this side seam, I'm just going to place a pin there, and then I'm going to place a pin in the other side. So that shows you your points at the halves. And then I'm going to take it and fold it in the opposite direction with those pins facing each other to find the quarters. And that's going to help you to find your center points. So I've just got my pins at the quarter points. So now with the side seam, I'm going to take that and pin it to this side seam of the trousers. And then I'm going to take this pin on the opposite side and pin that to the side seam on this side, and then taking this pin at the quarter mark and pinning that to the center seam of the trousers, and then the same for this one at the back. So just lining them up and pinning in place. So now I'm starting to get this shape in place. I'm just going to put some more pins between all of those marks, just to make sure it's secured in place. So you can see I've got this waistband pinned all the way around the top of the trousers. So now I'm going to follow around this seam so that once it's sewn in place, I'll be able to fold that up. So I'm going to go and sew that with my overlocker. Again, you can use a zigzag stitch. Just follow around that circle. So I've just finished sewing this waistband in place, and then you can just fold it up and it will look like this. So now the trousers are very nearly done. The only thing left to do is to hem the bottom of each trouser leg. So the way that I recommend doing it with this kind of fabric is to find your bottom edge, take your interfacing, place that at the bottom edge, and then fold up that edge over the interfacing. I'm just going to follow that round and then take my iron and press that in place. So I'm going to do that around both of the bottom hems of the trouser legs, and then I'll be back to show you how I'm going to sew that in place. So I've just finished pressing this hem in place. So I just folded over the bottom of that, and then there is the interface in between those two layers. So I've done that for the bottom of both trouser legs, and now I'm just going to go in and sew this in place with a zigzag stitch. So I've just finished following that bottom hem around, and now the trousers are done, so I can try everything on together.